basketball season, and man, they saw they got a stinker last night from the Syracuse perspective in a 24-point game. So let's go to our guest line and bring in our guy Doug Sherman from ESPN. Sherm, great to have you on here today.
I thought you were going to say, speaking of a stinker, here's Doug Sherman.
Well, yes, maybe that's how we'll see how the segment goes, Doug, and we can outro this way. I did have a caller last hour that was wanting you to tell Mike Dean stories from back in the day, and I said I don't know how many of those are airable, so I don't know if we can actually dive into that from the early 90s Siena Saints teams.
Yeah, quite literally 0 are tellable on radio.
All right, that'll have to be an exclusive for a later date off-site somewhere. All right, I've lost track of how many Cuse games you've done this year, other than a lot. I feel like we turn on the TV and there you are. What have you made of this team here this year? Obviously, you did not see their best performance last night.
No, and I do feel like I'm pushing Matt Park aside a little bit as voice of the Orange this season. I hope he doesn't mind. But, yes, they've had me doing a lot of games this year, and I've got a couple more coming up. And I always love coming home to the alma mater and to Central New York and everything. But, yeah, last night was indeed a stinker. And it was a game similar in terms of just being non-competitive as we saw with Tennessee and Maryland, where you're just like, boy, these guys really struggle. And I think, we were kind of tantalized and teased by J.J. being so good in the previous 2 games, thinking, well, if he does that, you can compete with everybody in the league but Duke, perhaps. Mm-hmm. But when he doesn't come through with 20 points and facilitate and do what we had seen him do the previous 2 games, they're really lacking for consistent options, especially without Donnie Freeman. And so offensively, you get a little from Bell, you get a little from Lampkin. Taylor had been playing well, but he, laid an egg, and Jair Davis has been playing well in place of Freeman, but he laid an egg in the second half. And so where are you going to get consistent production if not from JJ? I really don't know.
And, we're watching these games with you guys, Doug, and obviously you had Devo with you last night, and I believe you got him again on Saturday. Michael Carter-Williams is hanging out in the studio. He just got into the biz. He did a great job last night. Man, it's just, everywhere Syracuse fans go, they keep being reminded of the good times. It's one of these things, like our guys are everywhere. Sure, we can't get away from looking at guys that won a ton of games here.
I know, and I'm thrilled that now the ACC network is not just all Dukies and Carolina guys, mm-hmm. that we have 3, along with Coach Boeheim. We've got 3 Syracuse people, former Orangemen, and I do say Orangemen, at least when I'm not on ESPN, that they are, representing well. And I'll tell you what, Michael Carter-Williams, what I've seen of him in the studio, and I think he's going to be a game analyst coming up in the next few days for the first time, but I think he's been terrific, clearly knows what's going on in the ACC and knows in depth the different teams that he's talking about. He's not just trying to wing it like some of the former NBA guys do. And then Devo, obviously, he's been ingrained in Syracuse basketball for 20 years and knows everything about everybody. And he's done a terrific job, too, and it was a treat working with him last night.
Yeah, Devo's been doing a great job. And, yeah, it's been fun seeing MC Dubs in the studio the last couple of weeks for these Syracuse games. And, you've seen the league this year, Doug. It's not a good league compared to where we think of the ACC, right, historically. Like, Duke's really good. I see Louisville yesterday. They look pretty good. I don't know, toss Pitt, Clemson in the pile, Carolina. Then it starts getting thin real fast. What's your sense of the league this year?
Well, you just laid it out perfectly. I mean, the ACC might get 5 NCAA teams. Wake might be able to still sneak its way in. SMU is still a bubbly type of team, but how good they really are and how much damage might they be able to do in the tournament, I'm not so sure. So, I mean, if the tournament were to start now, I probably would pick Duke to win it all. And I could see both Clemson, Pitt, or 3 of them, Clemson, Pitt, and Louisville get into the second weekend. I think they are good enough to do that. Louisville's probably the second best team right now, and that may be recency bias from just seeing them. But, in their 7-game winning streak now, they have beaten all the other teams that are vying for that second best team in the league title. So, and the game last Saturday at Pitt was eye-opening to me. Like, man, they went into a rockin' Peterson Event Center and beat a good Pittsburgh team, and so they've beaten Pitt, Carolina, and Clemson in the last 2 weeks. So I think Louisville is right now clearly the number 2 team, but a huge divide before you get to Duke. Duke is head and shoulders above everybody, and I don't think it's inconceivable to think they could run the table in conference play.
Which is wild, because I don't know if anybody conceived, when they went to 20 a few years ago, I don't know if anyone thought that possible, and here we are, and it sure seems possible this year. Have you had them in person yet this year, Doug? Have you seen Cooper Flagg up close?
I have. I've had him a couple of times, and as I told Matt Park and Jim Sadlin, they had me on the pregame a couple of weeks ago, I said, when Duke comes to the Dome, which is coming up soon, first week of February, if I'm not mistaken,
yep,
get your ticket to get there to see Cooper Flagg in person. He is that good. He's better in person than he is on television, and he has improved so dramatically in the last 2 months from the start of the season to now. His efficiency is off the charts. And so, the 42 points and the highlight dunks get your attention. But if you watch the game and understand the game, holy cow. And again, he just turned 18 years old. So it's not hyperbole what people are saying. And again, don't take it from Doug Sherman. Take it from LeBron James. Take it from Kevin Durant, those who were on the court with him for the Olympic team last summer, who came away awed by the ability and the way he carries himself of this young guy. And he's got a toughness about him. He is so proud of being from Maine. I love that yes, he went away to go to prep school after winning a state title as a ninth grader in Maine, but he continued to play for the AAU team in Maine and wears Maine very proudly. So I like that. He appreciates and knows where he's from, and he's all of that. And I think back when I was a high schooler coming up in Elbridge, that I got to go to the Dome and see people like Michael Jordan, Sam Perkins, Wayman Tisdale, who was the best of them all, Akeem Olajuwon, Clyde Drexler. Those guys came to our town, and I went to the Dome and saw them up close. People right now should be doing the same thing, making plans to see Cooper Flagg.
Yeah, I'm still kind of annoyed, Sherman. We got Doug Sherman of ESPN with us. That I guess this would have been whatever year it was. Was this 2019, I think, when Zion was in school? Syracuse played them in the Dome. It was like a game or two after the shoe explosion game. So he didn't play, and it was like, oh man, I wanted to see this freight train in person to see what the whole deal is like. But yeah, it's fun when you get to see those guys up close. It might not be fun in the moment when you're looking at the scoreboard, but it's fun. It's fun in hindsight when you know you got to see those guys.
I'm telling you, it's been over 40 years, and I remember vividly standing along the baseline behind the rope or whatever they had when people would get to the Dome early, and it would be 10 deep, to watch Wayman Tisdale go through warm-ups. You're going to remember seeing Cooper Flagg up close, no matter how the game plays out and whether Duke, clobbers Syracuse or not. You're going to remember, I don't remember the scores of any of those games or the outcomes of the games from the 80s, but when you have a transcendent generational talent come in, that's what you remember.
Yeah, obviously the Orange had their fair share of them at the time as well, when you look back at Pearl and D.C. and everything that was going on. Back in the day is, we talk about this league. We talk a lot about NIL around here and the effect that it's got on college hoops these days, and kind of the rise here in the last year or two of the SEC to levels we really quite haven't seen from them on that level. What do you make of that when you look at ACC as a whole, which is a traditional powerful conference, versus, the quote-unquote football league in the SEC and some of these other leagues out there?
Yeah, the ACC clearly is behind and quite a bit behind across the board. And I use as an example of that, Virginia Tech lost 4 players to the portal last year, good players. 3 of them went to SEC schools, 2 to Vanderbilt, 1 to Ole Miss. Sean Padula, their starting point guard the last 3 years. He's now at Ole Miss and having a good year. So 4 players leave, 3 to lower-end SEC schools, and I've been told that they tripled their salary, we'll call it. Yes, NIL, but it's pay for play. They tripled their money. Now, Virginia Tech's one of the lower ones in the ACC, but you got to figure that, Vanderbilt and Ole Miss are not at the top of the heap, and they tripled their money. So, yes, the ACC is behind. Other than Duke, and I don't know the numbers, but the perception is Duke, Carolina, and probably SMU are top of the heap. And if you are not in that world, Clemson also, I think, is doing well in that space. But for the most part, the majority of the league is dramatically behind the SEC.
And what I find that frustrates a lot of people, Doug, and I don't know if you've gotten the sense of that, is that because we don't actually know the numbers, right? And we only sort of, we think we know what's going on. It turns it into a real frustrating situation, it feels like, when you're a fan and you're like, well, what's actually happening out there right now?
Right, and we don't know. And until we get, some A, guardrails, and B, transparency, we're going to continue to be frustrated. And the coaches are going to be frustrated because they think they know. They hear what they hear through their pipeline, and it's constantly talked about in coaching circles, of course. But they don't actually know for sure all the numbers either.
Right.
So they hear what another player is getting or being offered by another school, but they don't know. So I don't know what the answer is, and we all, you, me, everybody else, Brian, is scratching our head trying to figure out what the upshot is going to be and when we can hopefully get some sort of balance, if that's even possible. I mean, we've never had a truly balanced playing field when it comes to college athletics. We all know that. Mm-hmm. But it is so warped and so out of whack right now, I don't know how they're going to figure out to get it so that it's competitive again. Because for a school like Syracuse, it's clear as it's structured now, we are no longer among the big boys. Mm-hmm. And we are all spoiled by big boy basketball and having rosters full of NBA players. But the reality is, if we are offering dramatically less in salary than our competitors, we are going to fall behind, and we've already seen that.
Yeah, the results are playing themselves out, I mean, quite literally in front of our eyes on a daily basis. As we got Doug Sherman with us, and he'll be back on Saturday. Syracuse and Notre Dame, the teams met a month ago. Both teams were missing their best player. Both teams will have them back on Saturday with Burton and Starling. What do you make of this game coming up Saturday?
Well, I certainly would think that Syracuse will have the advantage by virtue of being home and having J.J. back. And I love the way J.J. reacted to last night's loss, talking about being punked and it's not going to happen again, that you can see. And I love talking to J.J. He just seems like a wonderful young man, sets a great tone for this team as its leader. And I'm encouraged by the way he took that loss and personalized it last night. So I've got to figure he's going to come back better on Saturday. And for those who, well, you would have seen Burton probably last year. You know, he was the ACC Rookie of the Year. He's not a big guy, mm-hmm. but he gets to his spot, and he's very, very effective. So if he's fully healthy, he has the capability of easily going for 25 and making things tough on a Syracuse team that just doesn't defend very well. And so, but I would still give Syracuse the edge coming up on Saturday.
All right. Went down to the wire a month ago in South Bend. Figures to be something similar in a couple days in the Dome. All right, Sherman, appreciate the time. Thanks for hopping on. We'll talk soon, all right?
It's always my pleasure, Brian. Thanks so much.
There is Doug Sherman of ESPN. You'd heard him and Devo last night. You'll hear him and Devo again on Saturday in the Dome. 4 o'clock tip time for Cuse and the Irish in a game on the ACC.